Okay, so today we are doing the same thing as we did yesterday as far as we are going to talk about how we can model fraction division. So that is going to be our topic again today, is I can model fraction division. And I will write that at the top of my paper. I can model fraction division. Oh, put an L in there. Oops. I can model fraction division. Okay? So I'd like you to take a minute and look at today's example. It is 2/3 divided by 4. Okay? And if we look at the opposite side of our paper, page 41, it is 4 divided by 2/3. So the problem is opposite. 4 divided by 2/3, and then today's problem is 2/3 divided by 4. Okay? So we are going to look and see how dividing a fraction by a whole number changes things. Yesterday, you can see here we took and we divided a whole number by a fraction. Today, we're going to divide a fraction by a whole number, and we're going to see how that changes our work. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Again, reminder here, this fraction is your part. That fraction is your part. Okay? Now, because we're doing 2/3 divided by 4, 2/3 has become our dividend. And you'll remember from yesterday, a dividend means the number that you're dividing up. So that's the term that we call a number that's being divided up. So 2/3 is being divided into 4 groups. So that is our dividend. Over here, the 4 we have, again, that's our whole number. And now, because 4 is doing the dividing, we're dividing into 4 groups. 4 becomes our divisor. Okay? Make sense? Just review from yesterday. Okay? Now, yesterday, again, we took a whole number and divided it by a fraction. So we wanted to know how many fractional pieces could we take from a whole amount. Okay? Today, though, we're going to think of that as how much will be in each group if 2/3 is divided into groups of 4. Think of this as how much will be in each group. So instead of how many groups, it's how much is in each group. Notice the difference there? It's not how many groups you have, it's what's in the group. How much is in the group. Okay? So it's a slight difference. You got to be aware of that. Okay? The first step is going to be the same. Model the dividend. Okay? Model that dividend. The number that's being divided up. In this case, the dividend is 2/3, a fraction. Okay? So, let me ask you this question. Is 2/3 more than 1 or less than 1? More or less than 1? Erica?
More.
2/3 is more than 1? 1 being a whole number. Is 2/3 more than 1? So if I have 2/3 of a pie, that's more than 1 whole pie?
No.
No? Changing your mind? Okay, Jesse?
Oh, no.
No.
Because 2/3 is a fraction.
This is a fraction. Fractions we're typically talking about less than 1. This is a fraction less than 1. So we're gonna, our whole bar is gonna represent 1 whole. But we don't have a whole, we have 2/3, less than a whole. So we're gonna divide our fraction into thirds, because it's thirds, and we're gonna shade 2 of the 3. Because remember, we have 2 parts of the 3 needed to make a whole. So we have 3 whole sections because we need 3 sections to make a whole based on our fraction. But we only have 2 of those sections. So that's why we shaded 2. 2/3. Okay? So now we have it modeled. Our dividend is modeled. So the next step is circle the appropriate amount of groups. So in this case, we want to circle 4 groups. We are dividing by 4, so we should have 4 circles. We want to circle 4 groups. Now, does that look like from this model that that's going to be really possible? No. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna scoot this up a little, and let's go ahead and redraw our model down here so we can talk about ways to split that up. So again, remember that's 1 whole. And so each piece, this is 1/3, this is 1/3, this is 1/3, right? So, okay. Now, again, we need 4 circles. We need to circle 4 groups because we wanted to divide by 4. So we need to divide this up into 4 groups. We're going to show those groups by circling them. There's no way I can circle 4 groups here. What do you think that we could potentially do so that we could circle 4 groups? What are you thinking? Burley, what are you thinking we should do?
Cut the 3 halves.
So, like, you saying this, cut this in half?
Yeah.
Okay, if I cut this in half, and I cut this in half, I can go 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups, right? Now, here's the thing. When I'm working with fractions, I want to keep all of my parts equal. I took and I cut this third in half. So I need to make sure I cut all of them in half. I'm not really working with this one so much because I don't have that piece, right? This is my missing piece over here, but I still need to cut it in half to keep my group sizes equal. Okay, does that make sense? So whatever you do to one of those chunks, you need to do to all of the chunks. So because I cut this one in half and this one in half, I need to also cut this one in half. Okay, does that make sense? So we need to name one of the groups. And what I mean by that is, tell me how much one group is worth. How much is one group worth, Brandon?
1/6.
1/6. Yes. 1/6. 2/3 divided by 4 is 1/6. And let's go over how Brandon got that. So he's saying 1 circle is 1. Okay, but it's not 1 whole amount, because remember the whole bar is 1 whole. So this little chunk isn't a whole. It is a fraction. So it's 1, that's the piece that we have is 1, so we know that's our numerator. Now our denominator, we always know that's how many parts you need to make a whole. Well, after we did some cutting on this, we noticed that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts now to make a whole instead of the 3 we had originally. So now it's 1/6. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of see how that came about? Good. Questions? Yes, Alexis.
Why would it be 1/6? Wouldn't it be 4/6?
No, 4/6 was the amount that we divided into groups. So one group would be 1/6. So remember, we divided by, if I scoot this down a little, we divided by 4. So we want to know what's in each of those 4 groups. If you take 4/6 and divide it into 4 groups, you have 1/6 in each group. Does that make sense? Okay, yes?
Kind of confusing because the 4, the other side is then the 3rd, and it needs to be a fraction.
We're going to do another one, okay? Let's see if that helps a little, okay? Let's go ahead and let's do another problem so you can kind of see another one how it works. So go ahead and flip up your flap. And we're going to try 3/4 divided by 2. 3/4 divided by 2. Okay? So again, step one, no matter what kind of problem you're doing, is always model your dividend. So I'm going to make a nice large bar so that I have plenty of room to divide things up however I need to. Okay? So remember, because I'm starting with a fractional piece, this bar is going to represent one whole, but I'm not going to use all of it because I have a fraction, right? I have a fraction there. But the fraction tells me that one whole I need 4 parts, so I need to split this into 4 parts. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 parts equal one whole. That's what my denominator tells me. My numerator tells me that I have 3 out of those 4 parts. Right? I have 3 out of those 4 parts. My next step now is to actually divide it into groups of 2. I want to take the part that I'm working with. Remember, this is the part that I have. I have 3 of the 4 pieces. Okay, I don't actually have this piece. That's why I have a fraction. If I had this piece, I'd have one whole, right? And that wouldn't be a fraction anymore. I don't have this piece. It's still important. We don't want to completely ignore it, but you need to understand this is not the amount that I have. If we're talking about pizza, I only have 3/4 of the pizza. I don't have this amount of pizza. Somebody else ate it or something. Okay? So that 3/4, the shaded part, is what we're really focused on. Now, I want that shaded part to be divided into 2 groups. So, do you think that I could go, okay, well, I'll circle 2, and then I'll circle 1? Do you think that would work? I see a lot of head shaking. Somebody want to tell me why they don't think that would work? Jace, why not? Yeah, Jace says it's not going to be even. You have 2 chunks here and 1 chunk, and that's not even. And she's exactly right, because when we're dividing, we're always making equal groups. That's the key to division. It's equal groups. So, is there a way that you see I could divide my 3/4 to have equal groups? What do you think, Miguel? Cut them in half. So, like if I cut this in half, and then I circle it, and then I circle over here, I have 2 equal groups, right? Does everybody see how I did that? Here's the key though, Miguel. Because you cut this one in half, I have to cut them all in half to keep things equal. So I need to cut this chunk in half, this chunk in half, and this chunk in half. Okay? My step 3 then is name the group. Because remember, when I'm dividing up a fraction, I'm not figuring out how many groups I can make. I'm figuring out how much is in each group. Okay? So how much is in each group? Well, in this one group right here, how many do I have? 3 parts. How many parts to make one whole? To make one whole. The whole thing.
8.
Jacob? 8, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 3/8. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, my answer then, 3/4 divided by 2 equals 3/8. Okay? Questions? We okay with that? Okay, I'm going to stop recording.